Hi everyone. In the times of corona madness and draconic restrictions of civil liberties and severe damage to our economies and societies, I wanted to look at a sample of people who play parts in this corona pandemic, ranging from politicians to middle-class businessmen to scientists, which again influence the governments. So let's see what they say, but also what they don't say in terms of their nonverbals, their body language. So first, I wanted to look at the owner of a bakery in Germany, pleading for customers to return so he doesn't go bankrupt. I'm sure this is representative for other businesses in other countries as well.
Müssen uns selbst helfen und Sie als unsere Kunden können
It's in German, but that's not really important.
uns helfen und in schlechten Zeiten zu uns halten, wie wir das auch tun. Ich möchte mich bei meiner Belegschaft bedanken, die wundervoll ist. Bitte gehen Sie zu Ihrem Bäcker, ob er Göing, Raute, Rebeschke heißt, es ist völlig egal. Gehen Sie zu Ihrem Bäcker um die Ecke. Die Bäcker aus Hannover sind für Sie da. Uns scheißegal, wie der heißt. Gehen Sie einfach hin, weil Sie retten damit Arbeitsplätze. Bei Bosselmann sind es 205 und wir haben alle um unsere Jobs eine Scheißangst.
He's afraid of losing his job, and of the 200 people who are working for him. Obviously, he's upset, crying and shaking, and his voice is breaking. So I'm wondering if it wouldn't be better to start demonstrating like the Yellow Vests in France. People are just still too nice. The issue here is that once we come out of this close down, the middle class and their businesses might be gone. And with that, typical German bakeries. So this will be a kind of mass extinction. So the new Germany might be much more diverse and less traditional. And as airlines will also go bankrupt, there will be much less flying around. So this world might be much more to the liking of the left-green political sector. So here we see Markus Soeder, a German politician that is a minister president of Bavarian and leader of the Christian Social Union, which used to be a conservative party.
Leider müssen wir uns heute schon wieder an Sie wenden.
Again, it's in German, but just focus on his body language. In particular here already, we see his characteristic looking down and pressing the lips together.
Corona hat unser Land fest im Griff. Heute Morgen gab es eine Pressekonferenz des Robert-Koch-Institutes mit nahezu flehentlichen Appellen, dass wir alles tun müssen, um die Fallzahlen zu senken, um unser Land zu schützen.
So when you just look at this picture here, it looks like an expression of shame. So shame means he feels guilty for something. Of course you could say he's just reading of his material, but he's quite a slick politician. He normally can speak quite freely. So it's always a bad sign if a politician has to read off very carefully what's in front of him. So it's a sign that he's not telling the truth.
Wir haben alle in den letzten Tagen viel getan.
He said we all did a lot during the last few days. And then he cleared his voice. This is not a very good sign. It's a little bit like the words got stuck in his throat and he had to clear it, again being a sign of untrustfulness. It could be also considered a cover-up, a distraction of the words he's saying, because again they're not true. So I'm somewhat suspicious of the truthfulness of what he's saying here.
In Deutschland, aber auch in Bayern. Leider ist aber noch deutlich mehr nötig. Die Zahl der Infektionen steigt dramatisch an.
So he's saying the number of infections rise dramatically.
Allein in Bayern von gestern auf heute eine Zunahme von über 35%. 817 Fälle sind gestiegen. Die Infektionsketten sind praktisch nicht mehr nachvollziehbar. Und nach den neuesten Prognosen des Robert-Koch-Institutes, aber auch unseres Landesamts für Gesundheit, ist, wenn wir nicht stärker eingreifen, entsprechend hohe Wellen an Infektionen zu erwarten, vielleicht sogar in Deutschland in die Millionenbereiche hinein.
So he's saying there might be millions of infections. Oh man.
Wir bedauern sehr, dass auch die Zahl der Toten steigt, auch in Bayern.
So now he's predicting that the number of deaths will also increase dramatically, also in Bavaria.
Von gestern 10 auf heute zum Stand jetzt 15.
So now he's saying from yesterday the number of deaths rose from 10 to 15.
Das heißt eine Steigerung um 50%.
So an increase of 50%. These are tiny numbers compared to roughly 2,000 per week who die of the flu in a flu season. This is ridiculous.
Wir bekommen, wenn wir nicht aufpassen, eine ähnliche Tendenz wie in Italien oder Frankreich. Bereits jetzt steigt die Kurve in Deutschland steil an.
So now he's saying, the curve of infections rises steeply. So I really don't like his face. Pressing the lips together is a sign of suppression. So often we suppress anger like that if the rest of the face would show anger. It can also be an expression of suppressed empathy if the rest of the face has a sad expression. In this case, it's less clear. He raised the eyebrows. It's essentially an expression of surprise, but it means being skeptical. So he's suppressing his feeling of skepticism and he's showing signs of shame. So these are not signs of a truthful politician. So it makes you wonder whether the draconic measures and restrictions of civil liberties are not a way to get rid of the political opposition, like a cleansing ritual. And by these huge changes we expect to our society, as I explained before, that might be a way to cover up all the many mistakes the government has been doing. It essentially makes things irreversible in terms of societal changes. So now let's talk about the scientists who advised the UK government, and I think other governments as well, with these model predictions, predicting roughly 500,000 deaths in the UK alone if no harder measures are taken. That's Professor Neil Ferguson. And he's part of the J Idea Institute in London, and he's interviewed by someone from his institute. So it's all internal. In particular, this video was uploaded on February the 5th, so quite a while ago. And let's see what he has to say.
Welcome. Thank you for taking the time to speak with us. Would you be able to give us an update on the current estimates that you're working on with your team?
So the main things we're working on currently are trying to get a better handle on really how lethal this virus is, what threat it poses to the human population. It's a difficult thing to do in an epidemic because just simply looking at how many people have died so far versus how many cases there are tells you very little. It takes quite a long time often for somebody from being diagnosed as a case to actually whether we know they're going to live or survive the infection. And so we're trying to correct for those factors. In terms of looking at the overall scale of the epidemic, we're getting kind of firmer estimates. What we can say is surveillance ongoing in China is probably picking up, if you think of all infections out there being a kind of pyramid, it picks up the top of the pyramid, the most severe infection. We think probably...
So he's very much relaxed. He's not challenged because it's an internal interview. He has his eyes quite a lot closed. He uses his steeple position we know from Angela Merkel. It's generally a position where you feel like you're in power and control. In this interview is a young lady with a very soft voice. She's very passive and we see this power gradient. He certainly doesn't feel challenged by her. Much better would be to have some beefy guy with a loud voice sitting across from him, so he would wake up and feel more under scrutiny.
10% or less of all infections in China are being detected at the current time.
Only 10% of the infections are discovered. So that means the death rate is completely overestimated because the numbers of infection is totally underestimated. It's a number in the denominator. So an order of magnitude can get you close to the death rate of the common flu.
The next tier down is really what's being detected overseas. We think sensitivity is somewhat higher, but still we may be only detecting maybe a quarter of all infections at that level. So simple questions we try to answer is, how transmissible is a new pathogen? How long has it been circulating? How much cases are always underestimated in every epidemic. And surveillance is never 100% perfect.
So again, he even admits it's underestimated, the number of infections.
Would you be able to explain a little bit about the uncertainty ranges around the estimates that you report?
So uncertainty is always high early in an epidemic, particularly of a disease we've never seen before.
It's interesting because his predicted 500,000 of deaths in the UK doesn't have an uncertainty with it. Normally provide an uncertainty interval.
We don't know critical things like how long it takes from when somebody's infected to when they develop symptoms, something called incubation period. We don't know how transmissible the disease is. So we try to estimate these things from quite limited data.
Okay, that's what I thought. So now let's look at a later interview from February the 20th, or that's when it was uploaded.
Around the world. It's almost certainly true that case numbers are declining in Wuhan, partly perhaps as a result of the control measures, but the epidemic we would have predicted to be peaking around this time in any case. I mean, the peak may have been accelerated and the drop accelerated by control measures.
She's quite a pretty woman. That makes the atmosphere quite relaxed between the interviewer and the interviewee, but it also creates this power dynamics, which you don't want to have in an interview like that. You want him on the spot. You want someone who presses him on difficult questions. This is not guaranteed under these conditions.
The rest of China, it's more difficult to assess what's going on. Official case numbers are declining. That may be partly.
So he again has a stable position, very sure of himself still, and she sits very much at the edge of her seat. She certainly appears much more nervous. So again, this power dynamics, which doesn't help here. Let's go forward.
Research questions are that scientists are working on?
I mean, if I should first say that there's been a truly amazing international response, both in terms of coordination, data sharing, pre-publication results, which is important in a fast-moving situation, not necessarily waiting for peer review.
Bingo! She seemed surprised for a minute, but a rigorous scientific process is based on peer review. You don't just bypass this, that other experts look at your data and your results and question it. He just went straight to the government with this result, and she's a little bit surprised. You saw the eyebrows go up, but that's it. No additional secondary questions pressing him. So now let's look at a more recent interview from March 11th. And so these interviews get shorter and shorter, these updates. Let's look at him now.
Nosed worldwide, cases on every continent of the world. Clearly some epidemics seem further progressed than others.
So now his legs are closed, they're crossed. It's a much more defensive position because the leg is providing a barrier to the audience and to the interviewer. And he's also now fiddling around with his hands, so no stable position anymore. These are pacifiers, they express a certain level of anxiety or stress, and by fiddling around, he's dissipating the stress. He's relieving it somehow. It's harder to sit still.
The concern at the moment from a European perspective is Italy. The case numbers are building up quite.
His eyes are also very much closed. He seems more tired and insecure. You see also one of the shoulders is higher than the other one, so he's already sitting much more uncomfortable. Asymmetries are always bad. They express achiness and a tendency or a wish to get up and leave. So he appears much less certain at this moment.
Fast in most European countries. France is second. Across Asia, the Chinese epidemic seems to be.
And she is always nodding to whatever he says. So I think we all get the picture now, how it all works. The middle class and their businesses will disappear, and with that, typical traditions for every country. And we will expect a much more diverse society once the smoke clears. We also see that in times of crisis, rigorous scientific protocols are bypassed, like peer review. And also the data is noisy, as he admits. Nevertheless, predictions are made without uncertainties. And we also see politicians being very unsure of themselves. And it's not only that, they don't seem to tell the truth. There's signatures of shame by looking down, by reading off the material, and by odd facial expressions like pressing the lips together, preventing themselves from saying actually what they believe, which is very untypical for talkative and slick politicians. We're gonna see a lot of surprises over the next few weeks and months, and societal changes accompanied by a potential collapse of the economy. And when the dust settles, things will be different. Okay, hope you liked my analysis, and talk to you next time. Bye.